members of the media, yes, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I know it has been a very long time, a few months since you have heard from the AFC. But as I said in our correspondence, we are here, we are alive, and we are kicking, although we've been doing that quietly as we do go through our process of internal rebuilding, reflection, and getting ready for the future. I'm happy this afternoon to welcome our three presenters. I have with us today Jaipal Sharma, who will raise concerns on the cost of living. I also have with us this afternoon Dr. Vince Adams, who, as you can imagine, being a main authority on oil and gas in Guyana, has several issues and concerns to report on since we last met officially. And least but not last, chairman of the Alliance for Change and current leader of the Alliance for Change, David Patterson, who will address, of course, the upcoming possibility of local government elections and other issues. So as we move forward, can I ask Jaipal Sharma to start with his presentation?
Thank you, Kathy, and members of the panel, media. Forgive me if I don't sound clear. Maybe some dengue, or there's a bit of COVID variant circulated, so we have to be careful. So, cost of living is no stranger to Guyana. Cost of living situation, high cost, price, food at the market. This is the everyday situation if you fall within that 58% of the people living below the poverty line. And that's the situation in Guyana. But there's some terminology that probably is not being used or ever used by the media or by the political arena. And this is the situation that we're faced in right here. So Guyana is currently experiencing significant agflation. Agflation is the term that what we're experiencing. And we should understand what's agflation. And agflation basically is where the price of food far outstretch what the government's projecting as the inflation in the country, which is the standard inflation. But this agflation is causing, as you know, cost of living crisis. And the cost of living crisis that we are facing is affecting every single Guyanese, as I said. Maybe if you are a minister of government or contracted, it would not affect you. But we are experiencing a cost of living crisis. And the cost of living crisis is pushing what I would term cheapflation. And the next terminology here, cheapflation. And cheapflation is basically where the price of the cheap items are now expensive. The cheap items are raising far faster than the imported items or the expensive items. And we could relate to that in Guyana terminology. And so we have the case of the cheapflation situation. But what all of this is causing, Kathy, and the viewers, is that the situation is causing a decline in purchasing power, where food prices are rising faster than the wages and salary that is presently prevailing. And Guyanese households are forced to cut back on the quality and quantity of food they are consuming. And this are affecting our brothers and sisters, Guyanese, that live in the rural and hinterland area. They are affected greatly by this situation. So maybe the reporters will want to expand on that and so on. But we are going through this crisis with a $1.558 trillion budget. And this is important. The government is not oblivious to the fact that Guyanese are facing this cost of living crisis. As a result of this, since 2022, this PVP Kieran administration, pumped billions of dollars in measures for cost of living. In 2022 alone, I believe they would have put in about $5 billion as cost of living measures. And in 2023, they put a $7 billion. 2024, they put a $9 billion. And 2025, they put a 9. And 2026, guess what? They put a 9 billion. But I've been out of the political arena for those years I mentioned. I never really heard that the members of parliament really, or the media, the fourth estate press, the government, and really they said this to say what exactly you did with these billions of dollars. Disaggregated for us. How did you spend it? The government in the budget clearly say we're going to spend it on measures that will benefit those that they need. I don't know where this money went. I don't know if Kathy, you or David know where this money went, but we need to ask the government where these figures that I mentioned went, where they went into. So this important that this budget 2026 have a 9 billion, and I don't know what is the targeted approach that is being applied. But we need to know this from the government. We need this $9 billion to be put into the economy immediately. In addition, the budget have in it a 29.339 billion sitting there. Underline item, I think is 6 to 1, 5 to 1. And here again, we asking the various unions, public service union, the teachers union, to ensure that they have the dialogue with the government to ensure that that the public servants and the teachers get at least a 25% increase immediately. We have the long outstanding cash grant, and now we have to wait for some portal to be set up and to be put online and things of that nature, so a person could update the personal information like banking information and so on, so they could get the money into the bank. But this is money sitting there in this 1.55 trillion, whilst Guyanese are punishing, they're starving, basically. So if you part this 58% of the people that living below the poverty line, you could understand the impact that the Guyanese are facing. Not easy. I go to the market every day or every other day. The reason why is because I live close by the market, and two is because also I hope to get a deal that I won't go and purchase groceries or greens or vegetables or fruits on a daily on a weekly basis. So every day I hope that I get a chance to get something cheaper, that some vendor would sell an item cheaper. And that is how I pass it. But people without transportation or without that availability of a closeness to the market, they will have to go and purchase on a weekly basis. And so when they purchase on a weekly basis, whatever the vendor is selling at that point in time, if all the prices are very high at that point in time, they pay the higher prices. And this is alarming. This is distressing, especially to the most vulnerable women, the single parents, the elderly. So, this is a situation that we're having here. And what is compounding this this inflation? The government is not taking responsibility. It's because of their spending pattern. They have a very large budget, and in the capital expenditure alone, there is 709.6 billion to be expended in capital. Now, when you start spending all of this money in the economy, and there's competition for the limited resources, I'm speaking indirectly to the food resources, with the number of visitors that are arriving in the country, and the government like to praise how many visitors coming in to our country, the hotels they're setting up, but they're not offsetting that with ensuring that the country have enough food, basic food, staples, that the people could purchase at affordable means. Now, I'm indicating to this government and to the general public, Kathy, that this government, if they put in subsidies into the system, and indeed they're putting subsidies in the system, that they should exercise some form of price control or monitoring. Now, I don't support price control, but I support monitoring mechanism. And so they must ensure that when they put these subsidies out there, that consumers are getting the reduction in the cost of the food items. And I believe this government is not doing that. Every day I'm seeing that they're speaking about subsidies, a large budget, and money here, there, and everywhere. For instance, they reduced the excise tax on fuel to zero. And this was something that it did, and it's commendable for many years. They reduced it to cushion the fluctuation of fuel prices and not to pass on the heavy cost of the electricity bill and fuel to the general public. This is commendable. But again, because of lack of monitoring or their hindsight, now they would say a zero rated excise tax and fuel alone is putting $100 billion in the pocket of every Guyanese. This is not true because every Guyanese don't purchase a gallon of fuel or a diesel or gasoline. Not every Guyanese has purchased that. But this government would say that every Guyanese, if they purchase a gallon of fuel, they save $500. They save $500. This is not true. So if you put $100 billion there, if the government is losing $100 billion because they reduced the excise tax and fuel, it's not benefiting every single Guyanese. And this is the problem, Kathy. So why the government don't say, look, I'm going to give and now they have our bank accounts, or they will be having our bank account shortly. Why they don't say they're going to put $200,000 in everybody's bank account to cushion the cost of living? Why they don't say we're going to credit your GPL bill with the next $200,000 across the board? Now, if you're going to subsidize GPL and GPL expenditure, and you're saying you're going to keep it low with the pre-pandemic levels, this is commendable. But here again, if a person, the electricity bill, like some of the ministers, 500,000, 600,000 a month, their subsidies is much more than my electricity bill, which is only about $8,000 a month. But if you put 200,000 to my electricity bill, I don't have to pay electricity bill for the entire year. And this is how we need to look at how the government is utilizing subsidies, because it only benefiting friends and families and the business community. It is not benefiting ordinary people. But thank you, Kathy. I don't want to take up much of your time, but this is the effects of the crisis that we are living in right now.
Hi, Paul Sharma. Thank you very much. Cost of living is the number one concern of the Alliance for Change. And I would say concern number 1A or 2 is certainly the management of our oil and gas industry. And I would like to ask Dr. Vince Adams to make his presentation. Dr. Adams.
Thanks, Kathy, and welcome to our wonderful media and listeners. Kathy and listeners, I guess since we've been off the air for a little while, these folks, the government and Exxon, they've been getting busy with announcements, and it's been tough to keep up, especially over the last couple of weeks, with the announcement, some of the most egregious and disrespectful announcements that have been coming out of the government and Exxon. Right at the top was, I think it was on the 17th of this month, which was just about a week ago, Minister Barrett announced that the government and Exxon has agreed on an export to settle the $214 million audit dispute. And we recall what that fiasco was about, the audit that was conducted in 2021, which is 5 years ago. And now we're hearing, after they've pussyfooted for 5 years now, we're suddenly hearing that they're gonna be, Exxon and the government are going to be selecting an export to make that decision. One person, well, I don't think anybody has to guess who is going to be that type of the kind of export that they're going to be picking. And let us not forget that this thing would not have even come to light, this $214 million that was overcharged to the project that went into Exxon's account, and we hadn't seen anything, and it would not have even come to light had it not been leaked. And then they decided to, rather than the government accepting blame for it, they decided to scapegoat an employee. And they changed the definition of a scapegoating, because from reports, this guy, as far as I know, he's back in the saddle. So he's back in his job, and maybe even gotten a promotion. But from the reports, he's also been rewarded with a graduate scholarship. So anyway, so they decided now that they're going to come and befuddle the folks. This is nothing but a slick move to avoid arbitration, which they know that they will lose. and to quietly cut a deal between the $214 million US. And if you recall, Exxon countered to that $240 million with $3 million. 214 to 3. So it's going to be somewhere between them. That's their intention. So the AFC is calling for the opposition to also, at least one member of the opposition, to also be involved in selecting of this export because nobody trusts the government. So if they want to save face and to allay any fears of suspicion, they need to involve also the opposition, which is part of the constitutional oversight of oil and gas and everything else in the country. In addition, we are asking or requesting that this export, whoever this export is, whichever export is selected by Exxon, the government, and including the opposition, that this export also looked at the process of doing these audits because there's a serious flaw here when you've got all of this money being charged and transferred to Exxon and then you find out about it afterward. Even the two audits that are outstanding right now that have been done, but they're hiding the reports. Nobody is seeing the reports based on preliminary reports that you're getting. Those are having the same issues where money has been overcharged and kept in Exxon's books. And by the way, just to let the public understand, this 214 is a minimal number because in any audit, you only do a very small percentage of sampling, maybe 5 to 10% of the all of the activities. So here it is that they're finding 214 million in the limited activity. So that's a small amount. And in effect, what has happened here? This money went into Exxon's books or account. So the government of Guyana has given Exxon $107 million tax-free dollars. That was our share. A tax-free loan for Exxon to do whatever they want to do while we are going out and borrowing like drunken sailors with a hefty interest. So we're losing money while Exxon is gaining money from that 107. And $107 million, as we all know, could go a long way in a country that has 58% poverty and the highest child malnutrition rate in the entire region, even worse than Haiti. So we're calling upon them. Those are the two things for the opposition to get involved. The other thing that we've been talking about for since we've been having these press conferences was Exxon. It was in the headlines a few days ago that Exxon is seeking government approval to ramp up production on the Ford project, which is the Yellowtail project. The Yellowtail project, and this year they've ramped up production, by the way, they've already ramped up production on the Yellowtail. They've ramped up production above, this is key, they have ramped up production on all 4 of the operating projects above what is required by the EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment, which is the law, which means that they are illegally producing above the safe operating limit. So now they've done that on 3, and they're doing it here now, and they want to do it on the 4th. And and we know that this here is just a smoke screen to be saying that they're asking for approval. There's nobody on our side who's going to be able to analyze. So it's laughable. It's laughable when I hear that the government is saying, well, the EPA and the Ministry of Natural Resources are carefully examining the plans before increase of course. Now, I would like for them to name who on these staff knows anything about what Exxon provides to them in oil and gas, because as you recall, they canceled all of our programs for building success. And then, of course, the Rutledge is coming up with all these mumbo jumbo nonsense to confuse folks about it. But this here is dangerous, and it's reckless and lawless, because what you do when the EIA, after EIA does their studies and say this is a safe operating limit, if you exceed that, that means you're putting everything in danger, because in the United States, for example, if they only think about going above the EIA limits, they will be shut down. As a matter of fact, when we were in government, we shut down Exxon for one of the same reasons when they were flaring. But as soon as we left, they've got the liberty from this government to go into this lawlessness, to putting the people in danger of financial bankruptcy and environmental catastrophe without, by the way, you remember they fought against the liability coverage to cover an oil spill by Exxon. They fought against that. So we don't have any of that. If something happens, we're in serious trouble. And then the other thing that I want to jump on quickly is the reserves, which is very important in this country. The reserve is the people's bank account. That is our account. What's below the ground is the people bank account, not the government. And we, especially in this forum, we've been calling, what are the reserves? They're hiding the reserves. They continue to hide it. And then Rutledge came out with this absolute asinine statement to tell people, take his eyes past the Guyanese people, to say, well, you could only have reserves when the investors sign off. Well, hell, they weren't signing off going way back when you were announcing after every discovery, you were announcing what the reserves update is. They have had 51 discoveries, 51, and we've not heard anything since April of 22, which means that's 4 years ago. So we are, and then they of course these reserves are also submitted in the quarterly report. So we're calling upon the government to release those quarterly reports. If you don't want to tell us what it is, release those quarterly reports and the field development plan for the people to know what the reserves are, because we're not getting this information. And by the way, lastly, when I hear the government, of course, the government officials are tying themselves out in like pretzels to parrot everything that Exxon says. Even when Hess says that the reserves are higher, the government comes out and follow Exxon, and then when Exxon says, well, no, I don't believe that, they jump back and follow Exxon. And then the government says, well, there's no reason why Exxon should withhold that data. Well, I've got a reason for you: decommissioning. The money, the billions that they've already started withholding is directly attached to the decommissioning cost that they're withholding, the billions, because it says that the lower the reserves is, the more money they can withhold from the as far as recoverable costs. So once again, the AFC is calling for the immediately release of all of the quarterly reports that contains not only the reserves but all the financial data. We're calling for an immediate release. There's nothing proprietary about it. So don't come back with this nonsense of proprietary. So thanks, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vince Adams, for your update. And I want to ask David Patterson, Chairman of the Alliance for Change and interim leader, to share his comments regarding local government and other issues.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you very much, members of the media. I just simply want to preface this by saying that we're glad to be back. I know there'll be several questions going on what we were doing, so which we will very willingly address any and all questions. But I have two quick statements here, and the first I'd like to make on GECOM. Over the last several months, the Alliance for Change has been conducting a series of internal SWOT analyses and consultation with our regional groups and diaspora chapters. One issue has constantly emerged as a major concern: the readiness of GECOM to conduct local government elections in 2026. The National Assembly approved more than $6.9 billion for GECOM's operations for the hosting of LGE 26. This budget was submitted without the involvement of the full commission and without the long requested reforms that were requested even before the last regional and general elections. Today, GECOM management structure is severely weakened. Critical positions remain vacant. The Deputy Chief Elections Officer, the Assistant Chief Election Officer, the Accountant, the Informational Technology Manager, the Legal Officer, and the Chief Security Officer. These are not optional roles. They are the core of election administration. 6 of the 9 senior administrative roles at GECOM are currently vacant. Any attempt to run an election without them is reckless and dangerous. To make matters worse, the full commission has not met since September the 7th, 2025. That means nothing required for the local government election can be lawfully approved. Not the work plan, not nomination day, not the voters list, not the polling agents, not the recruitment of staff. GECOM at the moment is operating without oversight, without authority, without legitimacy. If GECOM attempts to conduct 2026 local government election in this status, local government election 2026 will be compromised before they begin. The AFC demands the immediate reconvening of the local government, of the full commission, the urgent advertising and placement of all critical agencies, and an end to all unilateral administrative changes. I would like to thank you. I'd like to quickly address, Kathy, another one of our pet peeves, the Gas to Shore project. The Alliance for Change today is sounding the alarm for the long delay, escalating costs, and deepening uncertainty surrounding the government's Gas to Shore project. What was sold to the nation as a fast-track, cost-effective solution to our to lower electricity prices now become a project defined by shifting timelines, ballooning budgets, and a complete absence of transparency. When it was first announced to the public in 2021, the public was told that the Gas to Shore project will cost approximately $900 million and will be completed by the end of 2024. Today, these projections have collapsed. The pipeline cost alone has risen beyond the initial estimates. The power plant and the NGL facilities have experienced repeated delays and cost escalation. The transmission and distribution upgrade, essential for delivering the promised cheap electricity, remain behind schedule and underfunded. Despite these mounting costs, the government has not provided a realistic consolidated cost figure. Independent analysis now estimate the total project cost to have exceeded $3 billion and possibly more once all the associated infrastructure is included. When the PPP launched the Gas for Shore project in 2022, they justified this project based on the projection that the Guyana's projected peak demand would be 480 megawatts by the end of 2025. We as a party immediately challenged these projections as being unrealistic. Ladies and gentlemen, between 2020, when the PPP has returned to office, in 2026, to date, yesterday, the highest peak demand by the DBIS has been 220 megawatts. Our current peak demand as of yesterday is 200 megawatts. This is almost 60% below what the PPP projected and used to justify the Gas to Shore project at the costs they have. We note that the government has launched another bid for a second Gas to Shore project, as well as they've indicated that the ill-fated Amila Hydro project is back on stream. Once again, we are questioning the studies supporting these projects. We acknowledge that as a country, we should be planning to stay ahead of our electricity demands. However, without a sound plan, the government continues to squander our resources. Adding to this already inflated project costs, and I think that the country keeps forgetting, the government decision to hire 2 power plants to compensate for the delays in the gas to shore project is a tremendous burden on the country. They have high rental costs, high fuel costs now, and the maintenance and operational charges are astronomical. As of today, the country is paying these 2 project power plants 187 million Guyana dollars per day. These costs were never part of the original gas to shore project, and yet they fall squarely on the back of taxpayers. The hiring of these ships is a direct consequence of the project's failure to meet its promised timelines and must be added to the true costs of the gas to shore project. The government's primary justification for the project was the promise of significantly lower electricity rates. But with capital costs rising sharply, timeline slipping, and now the added expense of power ship rentals, the AFC must ask the questions that the government refused to ask. What is the new projected cost per kilowatt? How will the electricity prices fall if the capital costs have nearly tripled? And will consumers be forced to absorb these overruns through higher tariffs or increased taxation? The truth is, the government can no longer credibly guarantee cheaper power, cheaper electricity, because the financial assumptions used to justify the project are now outdated and valid. Kathy, just allow me to say one quick thing on something that happened today before I go back to you. We noted today that the government has gazetted several roads, I think 10 roads in Georgetown, removing these roads from under the purview of the Georgetown City Council and placing them under the Ministry of Public Works without explanation. And we are unsure if any consultation was held with the MCC on the effects of what has happened. While we investigate this matter, we will investigate and issue a fuller statement next week or at our next press conference. We wanted to highlight that all previous governments, including the PPP government, were very prudent in the past as to which roads would be declared public roads. They were generally restricted to the main access roads. The last time a road was gazetted as a public road, from my records, in 2017, that was Water Street, which was during the parking meters saga. Declaring a road a public road will have a negative impact on the revenue streams of the Georgetown City Council. We will investigate this and make a fuller report shortly at our next press conference. Thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you very much, David Patterson. Thank you to all our presenters. I want to turn this section now over to members of the media to receive your questions and to provide some answers to those questions. Please go through the usual procedure of raising your hand, identifying yourself and the organization from which you come. Questions can be posed to any of the presenters or any AFC members on this press conference. So thank you.
Mr. Sharma, Delhi Shabral, Damara Waves. Sir, can you say what is in your estimation, the current level of food inflation?
Thank you for the question. I will say that it's around maybe 8 to 9% in relation to food inflation. But you must note that the government is projecting an inflation of 2.5% in the 2026 budget.
Any follow-up question, Dennis? If not, let me invite Davina Bhagat, then followed by Adam Harris.
Good afternoon. This is Rihanna Ramsey, instead of Davina Bhagat. I have a question in relation to GCOM. I see you touched on the issues occurring at GCOM, but I wanted to know what's the AFC's position on the commissioners not stepping down, the opposition commissioners not stepping down and allowing the new opposition, the new main opposition, to appoint their own commissioners.
Thank you very much, well, not Davina, whoever it is. That's one of very interesting question. And I preface it by saying this. In 2006, the Alliance for Change, I was one of the respondents, one of the plaintiffs, as well as the late Everett Franklin, took GCOM to court and won on a question of proportionality for representation for parties other than the two main opposition parties, which at the time was the PNC and the PPP. We took GCOM to court and we won. It went to the High Court. It was reported in the West Indian Law Review because it was a constitutional matter. We said at that time that the courts agreed that nothing in the Constitution could force anybody to fall under, at the time, the main opposition party. At that time, GCOM never complied. The two main parties, which was at the time PNC and PP, what they did is change the laws of Guyana and they put every single aspect to do with GCOM under the leader of the opposition after consultation with the members of parliament. And we have, Alliance for Change have been fighting since 2006, all the way up to, we've always been fighting that as a member of the parliament, we should have representation in GCOM, so that, that GCOM could be reflective of the composition of parliament. So in that light, while we recognize what the law says, we recognize that the leader of the opposition names the representative, and I could add before I even go further that under Desmond Hoyt, he allowed the WPA to name a member. I think first Jocelyn Dow and then after Robert Corbin. So he recognized he was magnanimous enough. So we have always been fighting the Alliance for Change that the parliament and GCOM should reflect what the parliament is comprising it. So despite the law, we stand by that position whereby that the GCOM should reflect what the parliamentary composition should be. And that is our position on that we do think that the commission should reflect at bare minimum a percentage the composition of the parliamentary opposition.
A follow-up, please, Mr. Patterson. How do you see that being operationalized? Yes, how do you see that being operationalized in the current instance?
Well, that of course, as I said, has been a battle the Alliance for Change has been fighting for since our inception, the operationalization of it. As I said, that they changed the laws, which states that the leader of the opposition on consultation, but the decision was his own. The interpretation, and there are two interpretations, of course. I see whether a commissioner is appointed for life and he can only demit by his own volition, That's a legal question. I think a lawyer can answer that, but we have always said, and that has been our position, that the GCOM should always reflect the parliamentary composition. We had fought, obviously, through several leaders of opposition, including former President Granger when he made his last appointment. We'd always made the case that, that the Alliance for Change, being the third party in the parliament, should have the opportunity to name it the person. And as persons passed away or resigned, every single time somebody passed away or resigned and there was a vacancy on the opposition side, we would have approached whoever the leader of the opposition was for a consideration. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, but we maintain that position that it should reflect the composition of the parliamentary opposition.
I guess what I'm trying to get from you, Mr. Patterson, is whether you believe that for instance, the three current opposition commissioners should resign and make way for a new set of people to reflect the parliamentary composition. Do you?
I'm not saying that all three should resign. I'm saying that the final composition should reflect the composition of the current parliament. However, that is worked out between all the parties, I can't say, but I do think that it should be reflective of the opposition components at the moment.
Thank you, David. That's some very important background information that I think many people would have forgotten. I'd like to go to Adam Harris, and after Adam, we have Gerald Bryan with his question.
Ms. Hughes, I didn't get an opportunity to ask my question. I still have my hand up. Davina.
Oh, well, Davina, I think one of your colleagues came in, but so that's why we took that question. Let me get to Adam and
No worries,
Gerald,
Davina, we'll get to you.
and then I'll come back to you.
Okay.
I thought they'd forgotten to pull the hand down, actually. Okay, Adam.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I want to ask a question on the gas to energy project. I don't know what is happening at Wales. It's obvious that the government hasn't approached Parliament on anything pertaining to the Wales gas to energy project. Now I hear about this second project. Was there an approach to Parliament for funding for this, and was that funding contained in the 2026 budget? And if so, what was the sum appropriated for the second gas to energy project?
Adam, the sum what was appropriated was for the studies and the experts. They set out since 2025 and they continue in 2026 that they were hiring experts to assess the tenders that came in. I'm unaware that if any amount of money was requested for the construction of the gas to shore project. But I could say this, Adam, look, this government has scant regard for Parliament. The Prime Minister himself, who likes to consider himself an honorable gentleman, has more than 3 times publicly on television in the Parliament committed to lay over all the documents concerning this project. This is like 3 separate years, and has never done it. So the questions you're asking, there'll be no transparency. They will do as they've done before, raid the contingency if they would like, and then obviously use their majority to ram it through Parliament. So there's nothing there at the moment, Adam, but that doesn't say that they wouldn't proceed as they normally do without any recourse to Parliament. And to add that, Adam, we've borrowed from the Exim Bank of the USA a $590 million US. Other than the photo op of the president of the Exim Bank coming to Guyana last year, early last year, and turning this on. There has not been a single update, not even in the budget 2026, on how we have spent this money and how we're spending this money, what status it is, what the repayments are. It's just there's a big hullabaloo that the Exim Bank from the US is lending us money, and there's been total news blackout on what's happening with the money so far.
Sorry, a quick follow-up. So what is the stated final cost for the original gas to energy project?
They have not stated it, but based on the public awards and the contracts, and so we're at we have calculated it to be 2.9 billion and counting. It's 2 years behind budget, and that's just the power plant. The natural gas plant is it's another 2 years. I mean, they're claiming they're finished this year. Half of it will be finished this year, but we're looking at 3 years and 3 times the budget, Adam.
Adam, I just want to make an observation on this in terms of raising some of the AFC's concerns regarding the functioning of Parliament. We all know that it's now 6 months since the last general election, and up to now, the committees, the parliamentary committees, which bring a voice and accountability to the operations of government to the Parliament for scrutiny, those parliamentary committees have not been activated. So we literally have a Parliament where all we can see is that we have a speaker who travels extensively in the previous Parliament and in this Parliament, and goes out of his way to ensure that as much as possible, we limit the voice of the people being activated within the Parliament structure. And here we're talking about members of Parliament from various political parties, opposition parties, being able to do the work they were democratically elected to do. It is interesting to note that after the parliamentary election in Barbados, in under 5 days, Barbados had their results, but most importantly, had their parliament functioning. And that just shows that when we talk about democratic systems, it's more than just going to a vote and choosing who wins and declaring a winner. Having added that, I want to invite Darrell Bryan.
Kathy, could I quickly add something quickly?
Sure, go ahead, Vin.
Because there's something more fundamental than this that I think we tend to miss. And the fundamental reasons why we're here with this gas to energy project, it's because the government did not follow the rule of law for doing a feasibility study. And the feasibility study is in they always come up with the sanctity of contract. At clause number 12 in this contract, this sanctified contract or conveniently sanctified contract, clause number 12 clearly states that any use of the gas from that offshore project must be accompanied by or determined by a feasibility study. Clear. They didn't do that. That is why we end up here. A feasibility study would have identified the issues that we're having, such as the bad foundation, and it would have identified a process for project management and everything. And that was not done. That is the fundamental problem here. But it is the habitual behavior or the chronic behavior of this government not to do any planning whatsoever. You cannot run a country or do projects without planning. That is why I think I can't remember the international organization that says we're losing 40%. We're wasting 40% of the billions on these projects. So I just wanted to put that in there.
Thank you, Vince. Can I invite Darrell Bryan to raise his questions? Darrell, are you there? If not, I'll ask Davina to come
Hi,
in.
can you hear me?
I'm hearing you now.
Yeah, sorry
Go
about that. I
ahead.
had some technical difficulties.
Would you
Gerald,
identify which organization?
yes, Gerald Bryan, NCN News. I have
Okay.
two questions. They're more on the political party side. As a party, is the AFC in preparation mode for the next LGE, bearing in mind your previously expressed concerns about GCOM's preparedness? And second question, how are relations with between AFC and WIN, which is the new main opposition party, considering, the tradition is a collaborative approach between the different opposition parties?
Thank you, Kathy. If you don't mind, I can answer that. Gerald, Mr. Bryan, sorry. The reason why I raised the question on GCOM is because when going around with, as we've been quietly doing without much fanfare, as I said, having a SWOT analysis and those things like that, our party members have expressed a desire to contest in local government elections, but they've also very, very concerned that GCOM cannot conduct a credible elections, and that is why I've raised it. So therefore, obviously, we will be obviously looking very closely at the actions of GCOM. 6.9 billion Guyana dollars is no trivial sum. We understand that it's only, well, of course, the commission hasn't met. The commission hasn't been able to say how that money is spent. The commission haven't had an input to say any enhanced methods for verification. You know what I mean? The chairwoman had said how that biometrics is doable. However, was the time to implement it for the last elections was too short. The commission even haven't met to even discussed any interim measures about that. I mean, so we are very, very concerned about their ability to conduct elections, and the concern was raised by our members who are interested in competing in the next local government election. And your question on WIN, as all other political parties, APNU, FMG, ALP, and WIN, we remain members of the opposition, and that speak and coordinate whenever it's necessary, and that's it. There's no particularly unique overriding relationship with any of the opposition. We're all in opposition, and as members in opposition, we commit, the Alliance for Change Committee, to whatever is necessary to bring benefit to the people of Guyana.
Thank you, David. I want to go quickly to Davina. Thank you for your patience, Davina.
Thank you, Davina with Kaichur. The AFC through Dr. Adams have consistently raised concerns about Exxon breaching the EIAs and the safety levels of the FPSOs. I wanted to know if the party plans to take this matter to court.
It would be to me, it would be an easy court case as far as I'm concerned, because it's clear law. The EIA is law. The EIA is tied to the environment, the EPA Act. As a matter of fact, if you read the EPA Act, most of it is taken up by the whole entire process of the EIA and how you conduct EIA. Now, the thing here is the Davina. There's nothing wrong with going and doing, which is what they're saying. They're using this debottlenecking stuff is just to confuse and to confuddle people. Debottlenecking is no way in any lingo, no law or anything else, but they're using this debottlenecking stuff, which is basically to make adjustment to the system, the pipes, the valves, etc. When this project was designed, and the EIA went through all of this, it has a certain size of pipes, a certain material in those pipes, certain valves, pressures, temperatures. That is why an EIA takes sometimes years to complete, because you get exports from the public. And by the way, it goes out to the public for public comments. So you get expertise who would come in with the comments, and every single comment has to be addressed. So when you're finished with that EIA, you just can't go willy-nilly and decide that you're going to change the safety limit That's what an EIA does. It sets the safety envelope. So when you go outside of that safety envelope, that is breaching the law. Everything should have been done before. Now, if you want to change anything, you have got to go change the law, which is going through the process of changing the EIA. But they don't want to do that because it's going to take time and it's greed and everything else. They want to pump as fast as possible. If you want up the rate, fine, go through the system. It's very similar. Let's say you have a road, and the road is a bad road. It's an old road. You have a certain speed limit of 50 miles an hour, and then you decide to build a highway in place of that road, and you raise it to 80 miles an hour. But you have to change the law for that now to become law from 50 to 80. They just want to say, well, Exxon has done this debottlenecking foolishness, and then they're trying to think that insult our intelligence by saying, well, the EPA and the MNR have conducted studies. Well, who I want to know who at the EPA or the MNR knows anything about oil and gas to do that kind of a study. I know there's not a single person at the EPA that I run, not a single person who's had even 1 minute of training in oil and gas. So I would like for them to say, who are those people who are reviewing what Exxon presents to them? It's a farce. Exxon presented to them and they rubber stamp it. And the nation and the Caribbean, by the way, is left in jeopardy because if there's a spill by breaking the law, there's no full liability coverage, and Exxon is free to go. EMGL does not have any assets to cover anything. So we're left in bankruptcy, Guyana and the Caribbean, and environmental catastrophe. And everybody walk, and we would be spending every dime that, ironically, we'd be spending every dime that we've collected and more to clean up the mess. That's what we're in.
But that still doesn't answer my question. Given your convictions, is this something you're willing to take to court?
Davina,
I'll leave it to the chair.
let me bring a different perspective. Every country runs on laws. We expect the citizens of Guyana to uphold the law. We expect political parties, groups, international organizations, national organizations, and most importantly, the government of Guyana. We expect them all to uphold the law.
And let me add, I'm glad that Kathy said that. Kathy,
Yeah,
quickly.
and therefore, why would
Sorry.
Therefore, why would we expect or accept the government not following the laws of this country?
But Kathy, they were following the law when APNU was in office. They were complying fully with the EIA. As a matter of fact, on the Liza 1, the Liza 1 says in the EIA, this is what you normally do. You normally leave a factor, a window of safety. In Liza 1, for example, it says that the safe operating limit shall be 120,000 barrels per day. It also said that the operating limit shall be 100,000 barrels per day, which is a normal thing. You normally set it back about 20%, so you don't even get close to the safe operating. And that's what they were operating under APNU. They were doing everything under APNU, and then when APNU left, they started just getting lawless, and this government is allowing it to happen.
If the Alliance for Change had an adequate resource of financial support, I am convinced that we would be going to the courts for all the injustices that we see that this government is meting out to the people of Guyana. Unfortunately, we do not have the range of financial resources, but I hope, and I would say that we would be willing to put it on our agenda. And since it is a national issue, maybe we can get companies, individuals that will volunteer to work with the Alliance for Change to take this matter to the courts. I think that might help to bring a different perspective to your question. Any
I-
other questions?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Adam.
An observation before the question. Matters have been taken to court. Dr. Terence Campbell took the Natural Resource Fund issue to court. The case is finished, and it has been months. The decision is not being handed down. Vincent Alexander got what appeared to be a favorable decision of the court. The decision is not being handed down. And in Vincent's case, 2 years have passed. So I don't know if going to the court is going to make any difference. But my question has to do with the same ExxonMobil thing. Now, I noticed, as Mr. Adams said, a lot of statements by ExxonMobil, and I noticed that when they had the energy conference, for example, people known to be in the opposition were not invited to the conference. Mr. Adams, sir, are you familiar with some of the conclusions that came out of the energy conference?
Well, no, I don't think that all I read was in the newspapers, but I did write a letter, as you recall, with exactly saying with the same concerns that nobody from the opposition was even invited. And as you recall, a few years ago, when the question was asked of the government as to why the opposition are not invited, do you know what they said? That there was nobody qualified from the opposition to be invited. But no, I don't expect anything tangible coming out of the conference. And guess why, Adam? There wasn't anything tangible discussed at that conference. And I elaborated on it in my paper, in my letter, because if you look at it, I think they had close to 100 foreigners on those panels. They didn't have anybody from the University of Guyana, nor a politician. There was nothing on these committees that were substantial. And I don't know if you were there, but my understanding was that nobody in the audience was allowed to ask any questions. The panel that they put together, that they set up themselves, were asking themselves questions and answering the questions themselves. So that was a farce of a conference to start with. So I don't expect anything tangible to come out of it, and that's why. And they know it. This was just a show to check a box to say they had an international conference. This was a farce of a conference.
Thank you. I could add that the very first oil and gas conference that came under the umbrella of the then APNU AFC government did have in the presentations three, at that time, three opposition members that were invited by the APNU AFC government to present papers, because any oil and gas conference should be seen as a national issue, and therefore we should be big enough to at least extend an invitation to our members of parliament, whether they be on the opposition side or the other side. Our perpetual immaturity, whereby we only invite government ministers and government members of parliament, just shows how low we have sunk as a country. May I invite our final questions? Are there any other questions that any of our reporters would like to ask? Davina, go right ahead, and this is going to be the last question.
Please. Oh,
okay,
please.
Adam. Davina and Adam. Davina, go ahead.
Thank you. This is for either Dr. Adams or Mr. Patterson. Exxon has said Ghana could clear the cost bank by year end, given the high oil prices. But with an 8th project pending approval and a 9th in the pipeline, what do you make of that statement?
Sorry for
I'll
laughing,
take that.
Davina. Sorry, Vince, you go ahead first.
Yes, Davina, let me tell you something. I wish I could describe this guy, but this here is just like I said before. This guy comes in here, and this is from day one. from the time he arrives, he's been disrespecting Guyanese people's intelligence. This here is an impossibility, Davina. If you, based upon the numbers, their own numbers, if you add up the investment capital cost for those 7 projects, it is 62 billion US dollars. So first of all, he's saying, well, it's only 5 billion left. That is absolute nonsense. That means that they would have to been paying a whole lot of money that nobody has ever seen. But you cannot, and by the way, Davino, here is where this guy is lying through his teeth. It was just a few months ago in New York, before oil prices ever started getting up, it was, I don't know, $60, $70 a barrel. He made the same exact statement at a meeting that he held with people in New York, that the cost will be paid off at the end of 2026. But then he realized that he's got to explain this again. And unfortunately for him, the oil prices starts coming up, and he said, well, they're going to do that because of oil prices. Even though he said before, without oil prices, that they were going to do it. This cannot happen. It cannot happen. If you run the numbers, it cannot happen. And especially, like you said, with other, as long as there's no ring fencing, it cannot happen. And it's not only the 8 projects. You've got, 3 more probably, or 2 more. And if you add the cost, it's going to get to close to 100 billion US dollars. So, it's a bunch of hot air. However, again, Davino, I hope that you folks in the media would start shouting from the rooftop to tell the government they need to publish, you and the entire public needs to see those quarterly reports that have all of this data as to how much money is coming in, how much is going towards capital costs, how much is going towards operation costs, how much profits each side is getting. That's the data that we need, that they're hiding. So I don't want to listen to Rutledge anymore with his lies. That's what I hope that's what you guys would be clamoring for from now on.
Can I, Cathy, allow me to add something? I'm not going to go over what Vince is absolutely right. It's one of those things that they would say to placate the general public. But what I found most annoying with his statement, Davina, was that he is on one hand claiming that in 2027 or sometime shortly that the cost bank would be filled and they'd be fully repaying. Yet he looks you in the eye and looks and tells us, but he can't guarantee that the Guyana will be getting the 50-50 share. You know what I mean? As prescribed, the PSA is a legal document. They've been hiding behind sanctity of contract from day one. So they're, on one hand, they're saying to you, we can't touch this contract, it's the holy grail. But there's Rutledge saying to you that we'll be paying off our entire cost bank, if you believe him or not. I mean, I'm not, Vince explained it, it's unbelievable. But when we finish paying off this entire cost bank, according to him, there is no guarantee that he and his company will uphold the sanctity of the contract, which says when the cost oil has been recovered, it's a direct 50-50 split. He says, oh, well, he doesn't know what the split is going to be. I suspect, and we at Alliance for Change suspect, that the government and Exxon will come to the public and say, and try to adjust the formula, adjust the PSA formula, just to keep the public disquiet down. Instead of coming and saying that the split is now 50-50, they will come in some other minuscule adjustment. They will now get 70-30 or something, which is just pure smoke screens. And what I would hope the media would ask Mr. Rutledge next time he comes and he speaks, if they so believe in the sanctity of contract, which says when the cost oil is fully recovered, forget if we agree with him or not, that the split should be 50-50. How is it him and his company are saying that they don't know, they're not guaranteeing us to have the 50-50, based on all the facts he himself is trying to the world is trying to pull over our eyes? That's the question you have to ask.
Let me add quickly to just for a little bit of clarification. The 50-50 is also a fraud.
I know, we know that, but yeah.
those billboards that they have up
Yeah.
that say we're getting 52%, it's a fraud. So even if, let's say you get rid, it's an impossibility. If you get rid of the capital cost, you still have cost oil. All you're doing, remember, cost oil comprised of the 75% comprises of operation, which is the daily salaries, subcontracts, and it also has a capital cost. So if you remove the capital cost, you still have operating dollars, that the operating cost that will be there forever. And when I did some rough numbers, looking at the reports to the SEC, that operating number is 35%. So you're still going to have 35%. So when you remove 35% from 100, you're going to be left with 65%. And if you divide 65% in half, which is the 50%, we'll be getting 32.5% plus the 2.5%. The most we will be getting that is possible is 35% total, and no 50%. You're never going to get close to 50% because of the continued operating costs that you have to cover. So again, it's fraudulent. That billboard is fraudulent. And you should not be telling people 50%. It's impossible. We'll never get there.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, Adam, over to you to close.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, you looked at peak energy demand for Guyana, and you said by the end of this year, it's going to be 220 megawatts, sir?
No, what I've said, the highest ever peak energy demand in this country was 220, and that was between September, October of 2025. What I'm saying is that if you go to any one of the government's documents to tell you that justify the gas assurance and all this expenditure, they have projected in writing. Now I'm not making this up, that the peak demand of Guyana would have been because of Guyana's being the fastest growing economy in the world and etc. Blah blah blah. Everybody's coming to Guyana. They said to us in 2021 that at the end of 2025, our electricity demand would have been 480 megawatts. And that is why they have to spend the billions upon billions immediately on the Gas Ashore project. Right now, so it's obvious that either one, Adam, people didn't like Guyana like they're saying, that everybody didn't want to come, or two, that they were just lying out to their teeth just to justify the Gas Ashore project, because it's right now the highest. Yesterday, the peak demand was 200 megawatts. I confirmed that. The highest was 220 during the heat wave last year, October. So everything that they tell us, every single thing that they do is based on a lie. And then they're pathological liars.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to, first of all, our reporters for joining us this afternoon, for all your questions. And we continue to applaud the work that our reporters do in trying to ensure transparency and the sharing of information in Guyana. I also want to thank, most importantly also, our presenters today, Jaipal Sharma, David Patterson, and Vince Adams. And with that, let me wish you all a safe weekend and take care until we meet again.